All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for this quick midday webinar learning opportunity. We've got a lot to squeeze in too, 45 minutes. So if you are here, you're here for our Inclusivity and Accessibility webinar. And just some quick Zoom tips. We are recording and we'll make this available afterwards. We'll send out the recording with notes and Teresa's slides, if that's okay with Teresa, and contact information for speakers, if that's okay for them. So do just keep yourselves muted unless you're speaking, and feel free to use the chat for questions if you have questions that pop up outside of our Q&A, but we'll have a couple times for Q&A throughout. And then thank you to our sponsors. We can't do this without them, and specifically want to call out Kennebec Savings Bank, who for anyone in a handful of communities who are eligible, they're providing participant stipends. And I want to say it's Freeport, Brunswick, Gardner, maybe Hollowell, but I might be mixing those up a little bit. I should have them in front of me. But we're grateful for that, and something we're looking to increase for next year for educational opportunities so that more folks can be eligible in different areas for that participant stipend. So I will stop this share screen just so Teresa can get slides up, but I'll invite you all to pop your name and location, community into the chat just as a way of introducing ourselves, since we don't have time for full introductions. But we're really thrilled. I'm Sylvie Piquet, and Perry Williams is here with me as well from Maine Downtown Center. And we're thrilled to have a great lineup of guest speakers who are all going to be talking about inclusivity and accessibility, specifically in the physical accessibility kind of realm for downtowns. And hopefully you hear about some resources and some ideas that you can take back to your community. As I mentioned, there'll be a couple opportunities for Q&A. And with that, I want to just read off that, Main Street America is at the core of our approach is being open and welcoming for all, and creating places of that shared prosperity and equal access and opportunity and inclusive engagement. So this is really at the heart of the National Main Street Center and Main Street model. So we're excited to be sharing it. And we also recognize that this physical accessibility conversation is kind of part one or to many parts that we hope to help continue to unpack throughout next year's educational opportunities. So please keep that in mind. Thanks for the intros. And Teresa Savoy is here from Maine Department of Transportation, and she's gonna give us a short presentation, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A.
Okay, hi, can everyone hear me, I hope? Yes. My name is Teresa Savoy. I work at Maine DOT. I'm the ADA coordinator for Maine DOT, and I'm just going to really quickly, wait a minute. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. I'm just going to go over really quick what I'm going to cover. I'm going to kind of talk about what an ADA coordinator does at the Department of Transportation, our ADA inventories, what we have to look at, and it's the intricacies of all that. I'm going to be really quick there. I'm going to talk about the challenges that I've seen over the years at Maine DOT, and also some DOT initiatives that are out there for communities. So the ADA coordinator, I develop and maintain the ADA transition plan, which is a requirement under the ADA, and it kind of gives a roadmap on how we're going to try and achieve accessibility. I do a lot of trainings to staff, to contractors and consultants, and to towns, public work directors, leaders. I kind of try and keep our pedestrian work zones, give trainings on that, and talk to people about how to do better at that, because when we're building stuff, we also need to maintain a safe place for people who use different modes of transportation. And I attend the safety audits and planning partnership initiatives that I'll talk about later. I go through that with the planners and the towns to ensure that when we're looking at things, we're looking at it holistically, and we're looking at it with everybody in mind, all different abilities. I provide a lot of technical assistance on contracts to make sure we're making things ADA compliant. And I do update and review guidance and policies. We have new standard, not new, but always developing standard details on how to build curb ramps, which is really a difficult thing, especially in our system. And I'll talk about that. And I oversee and maintain the inventories that we have. So we have inventories. We have over 15,800 ramps that we've located so far and that we've built so far on the main DOT system. So those are state roads. We have over 800 miles of sidewalk. We have 7 ferry terminals. We have pedestrian traffic signals, and that's always changing because we're putting in new ones and vice versa, and all sorts of stuff. And rest areas and visitor centers that we are required to try and maintain accessibility on. So the challenges, understanding and meeting compliance. ADA compliance is very difficult. When I started doing this job, I thought that engineers and contractors knew how to make compliant curb ramps. They do not. They do now, but it's really hard because ADA requires some really specific guidance. And so like 8.3% ramp, and it can't be more, and no more than 2% cross slope and flush, and has all these different things that we have to say are compliant. And if they don't meet that, then they aren't compliant. So I do a lot of that. And we have a very old, large, complicated system of villages, urban centers, and also varying responsibilities. Urban compacts, where there are 47 towns and cities, I believe, that have urban compacts where they're responsible for a lot of work inside their area. It's not always the whole municipality. Sometimes it's within municipalities, and it's based on population. We have main municipal planning organizations, regional planning organizations, municipalities, and then of course the state. And when we do work, we fix what we're required to fix as far as curb ramps go, and it's mostly curb ramps requirements now, per the U.S. Department of Justice and U.S. DOT. We also want to ensure that people of all abilities are safe. I work in the safety office, so I do attend a lot of safety audits. If you can't get on and off a sidewalk or go through a crossing safely, then that's important to everybody. And that's why we have these very strict, rigid standards for compliance, because they've been tested with people with different mobility devices. And people with visual impairments. Ensuring people of all abilities are included, and there's a thing called universal access, which is kind of a step beyond ADA, but it's kind of when you design things looking at the universal access. So meeting compliance, and I just talked about this, is very difficult. We have to meet it to the maximum extent feasible. ADA recognizes that the public right-of-way isn't a building. You're not building it plumb, and you're not putting a level on it. You've got hills and you've got things underneath the sidewalks and the roads. So it's really difficult to achieve compliance. So we have to do it to the maximum extent feasible. And we need to document that when we can't reach compliance. So we do a lot of that especially when we're retrofitting curb ramps. So this is a good rendition of a pedestrian sidewalk corridor. There are lots of standards that we need to meet. The walkway should be 4 feet. The new PROAG, which is the old PROAG, but is now out and has left the access board, that says you need 4 feet. So, and you can't have anything overhanging that's less than 80 inches. You can't have protrusions. You can't have, heaved pavement. And one of the things that we found really challenging after and during COVID was people putting their restaurants pretty much out on the sidewalk, and they weren't leaving a lot of room for people with disabilities or with strollers or who were visually impaired. So we've tried to educate folks on that and work with communities on that. I don't enforce that. I don't have any enforcement abilities for that, but just it's mostly an education thing because people need to get through the restaurant and over to where they want to go. So we're working a lot on that. Universal design, and I mentioned earlier, it produces a environment that's usable by everybody, and it's specific because you design it so you don't have to have adaptation or any special designs. You kind of are looking at how can we make this accessible for everybody. And a lot of times we don't do that. We build these things and we're like, oh, we're going to put some stairs in over there. And the only way to access beyond those stairs is some place that isn't universal, that isn't easily accessed. So it's just thinking about that first. And that's what we do a lot of. It's like, how do we want to look at this? How do we want this to look when we're done and feel? And how is everybody going to be able to use it? And one thing that I didn't mention here is people with disabilities travel. They travel to your towns. They want to be able to use your facilities. And when they can't, they don't come back, or they get on Google Maps and they say, I can't bring my kid here, or I can't get through here, so I'm not going to go there. So there is an economic impact to this as well. And so it's just something to think about when you're talking about it to your communities, your business folks and stuff. We have some initiatives. Dakota Hewlett is our active transportation planner, and he has the bicycle and pedestrian program funding. And it's an allocation for bike and ped facilities. And it is competitive. There are certain forms and applications you need to fill out, but it's an opportunity to create or improve a system through that project. We have the Planning Partnership Initiative. I talked about that before, but we look at communities. Like I went to one in Fort Kent a few weeks ago, where we walk through and we look at things, and then we plan on what's feasible in these areas. And so it's just interesting and a good process, instead of just saying we need our sidewalk fixed. It's like, but what do you need beyond that, and how do you want it to look when you're done? So these are really helpful for people, especially if they want to apply for a village partnership initiative. And there are two types of VPI projects. There's a large transformative projects. These are multi-million-dollar projects that will transform your village. If you drive through Hollowell, that is kind of what a VPI looks like. Belgrade, where we just took it right down to the bones and we built it back up and made it accessible and usable for folks. And then there are small spot improvements through the VPI. And these are just quick projects that, some can be gateway treatments, better signage, better pedestrian crossings. If you have one that needs to be done, it might be an opportunity to say, okay, we're going to apply for this and see if we can enhance the ADA, the accessible crossing, make it safer for people.
And Teresa, we've got 1 more minute left, so
yeah,
I think
I'm winding down.
Perfect.
These are the CBI contacts, and we have 5 regional planners. They're the folks to contact for that, and that website there, the community-based initiatives, and you can just Google Maine DOT community-based initiatives. That's my information. I also have a website. You can just say Maine DOT ADA and it all comes up, and fascinating stuff. And that's it.
Thanks so much. That's great. And since you are able to stay with us for questions at the end, I think we will put a pause there, and feel free to put questions in the chat if you don't want to forget them, but we will kind of air them after we speak to our next series of speakers. Teresa, really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us and sharing that information. Next up, we've got a couple of our downtown leaders. We've got Dave Gogel here from Rockland Main Street and Rachel Ives from Heart of Ellsworth. So Dave and Rachel, thanks for joining us. Feel free to unmute yourselves. The rest of this will be a little more talk show style. So my first question for you two is just if you could summarize kind of your approach to creating accessibility and inclusivity to your events specifically. It's something you had both really just mentioned that you had an approach to, and would love to share what your approach is. And we'll start there. So a quick summary from each of you.
Rachel, do you
Dave,
want
you
to go
want
first?
to go first?
I'm happy to go. Well, and thanks for that intro. And again, excited to be here for this chat. This is a really important issue for Rockland Main Street, particularly because of some of the things that Teresa was talking about as it relates to response to COVID and creating like more outdoor kind of public space. And I'll touch on that in a second. But just to back up, we first started thinking about this topic when we actually, through Maine Downtown Center, received some support to host a community conversation around how Rockland could be more welcoming and inclusive. And so while that was a very broad topic, one of the things that we were talking about was kind of accessibility, in particular for like our community and visitors that have mobility challenges. And so we started talking about that, and this and throughout this theme of like people want to go where they're celebrated, not tolerated. And how do we create space where we aren't, it doesn't feel like an afterthought. And it's more like it's more kind of baked into the design. So we started looking at all of our events and our programming in terms of what would it mean to celebrate everyone who's coming, make everyone feel welcome, and how did we bake that into like the ethos of our design. So that's probably a good like top line summary. There's some things that I'd love to unpack there, but maybe I can turn the floor over to Rachel, and then we can.
That's great.
Bounce back and forth and unpack some of that
That's
stuff.
great. Thanks.
Fantastic to hear. Yeah, so I'm Rachel Ives. I'm a contractor here at Heart of Ellsworth in Ellsworth. And basically my approach to making sure that events in our space are accessible comes from an event management background. I went to school and studied some event management. And so things like the checklists that I believe I shared in the group chat were just really helpful things that resources that I got. And I come from a more, I guess, novice perspective when it comes to event hosting in downtown spaces. So hopefully my perspective is just more like on the ground. This is kind of how I would apply what I do know or what I've learned over the years or from school to the everyday application and events. So yeah, that's just a very generic overview of my approach.
That's great though. And I think that event checklist that you have, I'm not seeing it in the chat. If you don't mind posting that again.
For sure.
Or I can put it in there from what you sent the email. But I think, Heart of Ellsworth has, really adopted this very comprehensive approach with this checklist so that they can be really intentional as, each of the events come up. And I think that's just a really helpful go-to. So she is including that link in the chat now, and we'll put it in the notes. And Dave, if you want to unpack just a little bit more some of that kind of ethos and approach that you all have both to events and meetings that you've mentioned.
Yeah, totally. So let me I first want to specifically touch on something that Teresa was talking about as it relates to parklets and creating more space for restaurants. I would say one of our biggest challenges was in Rockland, on Rockland Main Street, the curb height is varied, right? So everybody was like, "Oh, it's really simple. Make parklets and kind of," but it's not that simple when you have these uneven curb heights. So we knew, as you said, like it's mostly an education thing. We went into this with that solid understanding, having done that foundational work at the start of the. I guess right before kind of people were thinking about outdoor space. So we knew that we wanted to make sure that everyone felt welcome and included. So we ended up, taking more space than folks probably wanted us to, and we got rid of more parking than folks probably wanted to, because we knew we needed to save space for, we ended up, again, using kind of pricey ramps in and out of those areas. And so it was really great that the city purchased those ramps for Rockland Main Street to be able to utilize in all these kind of tactical urbanism projects that we were creating. But that does bring up a really challenging thing that we were dealing with, right? As we think about these mobility challenges, we were often met with how do we create more public space while also understanding that parking in close proximity to a lot of these businesses, restaurants is really important for those that have mobility challenges. And so something that we wrestled with a lot was thinking about like, are we restriping and adding ADA spots in different areas that are closer? How are we thinking about balancing this as it relates to these technical urbanism projects? This also, as we think about kind of our efforts to create more pedestrian safety and bike safety in our downtown, we find that we're trying to do more things to limit the traffic pattern and do these demonstration projects. But anytime we do that, we often are trying to figure out, okay, anytime we create more space for bikes and pedestrians, we a lot of times are making it more challenging for those that have other mobility challenges to get to the places that they need to go to. So we've been, the way that we're addressing that is anytime we close down a part of the street or we do a tactical urbanism project, we either have volunteers set up to guide people to those ADA spots, and we've been working with the city. We're going to try and purchase like a golf cart that the city has said that they'll be willing to store when it's not in use, that we use when we are doing kind of either pedestrian or bike kind of events, or we're doing like a tactical urbanism project. And the idea is that, long term, we hope to have like hardscape improvements. But in the near term, we've just been trying to figure out how do we look holistically about what we're trying to achieve, which is like a welcoming and inclusive community, and make sure that we've as Rachel said, like gone through that checklist. And then the last thing I'll say, because I know we're tight on time, this is, we have seen some success, right? Where we did some tactical urbanism work at the start of the pandemic. We saw success, and the city was able to do hardscape improvement and like expand the sidewalks here in Rockland. And we're trying to take that project and expand it even further. But the idea was like we widened the sidewalks so that way we could give more space for some of these pedestrian activities, but also not hinder some of those pathways like Teresa was mentioning. So that way we're not making it more complicated for people to get where they need to go. So I know we didn't get a chance to talk about the event piece, and if we have time, I'd love to circle about how we're doing it on events. But knowing that Teresa talked specifically about some of those challenges, I wanted to share how we're dealing with that in Rockland.
I think that's great. And it really highlights also kind of the holistic look that you're approaching it with, that, if we do this and this is one goal, we have to also consider this and the partnership that you're talking about, in working with the city to figure it out from the beginning, and not always kind of that catch up, which sometimes we find ourselves playing too easily. Rachel, just for our kind of, closing time together, if you want to expand on anything, specific to Heart of Ellsworth approach, as well as kind of where you're looking to go, and any work you're hoping to do in this area of accessibility.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. So I work on a couple of different events. We have an upcoming Meet the Candidates event next week, which is really exciting. But one of the things about that event is that in addition to being in person, where we do also have to check with the venue to make sure that there are accessible spots for people to sit, etc., there's also going to be a live stream. So how do we consider accessibility in the virtual space and make sure that we've got things like closed captioning for that live stream all set up in advance? That's one thing that we would like to do more of. Also making sure that our website is really accessible too. I know this is mostly a conversation about physical accessibility, but that is also really important from me and my background in digital marketing. But as far as other events go that we would like to improve and do better on, I also work with Pride, which is affiliated with Heart of Ellsworth. It's technically separate, but one of the things that organization really wants to do is be as inclusive as possible. That's the whole creative LGBTQ+ community. It's making sure everybody has a home and feels valued. So one of the things that event is trying to improve for next year that we didn't quite do well this past 2023 June Pride Month is that we want to make sure we've got a sign language interpreter for next summer. We kind of missed the mark. We were like a couple weeks late getting the best sign language interpreter in our space booked. But one thing that they really found value in was that we'd already earmarked space for an interpreter in our budget, and making sure that people know that they're not only welcomed, they're not only celebrated, but they're valued and they're compensated, also goes a long way to making sure that people feel included and that they're valued. So even though we weren't able to book her for this past year, we do know who we're working with, and she knows that we are very excited to work with her and that it'll be well worth her time to come and interpret for the folks who will be there who need a sign language interpreter. So
that's great. Thanks so much, Rachel. And I think your just mention of the budget, it really speaks again to that, like looking at these accessibility components from the beginning, right? From like square one, when you're starting to build something, just pen and paper, and making sure that there are those budgetary supports for the accommodations that we need to make. And thank you so much, Rachel and Dave. And I'm glad you're going to stay on as well for questions that we'll come back to in a few moments. We are going to transition to Dwayne. It's like we have these quick spotlight speakers that is hopefully getting the wheels turning. And then we'll have time for some more engagement from folks. So Dwayne is here from Augusta because he works on both the age-friendly committee as well as the Cyclists and Pedestrians Invigorating the Augusta Life Capital. I love that name. And the Bicyclist and Pedestrian Safety Committee. And we'll probably not have time to hear about all of those, but Dwayne, wonder if you could just give a quick summary on the Age-Friendly Committee and what you all are working on right now in terms of projects and maybe potentially any challenges.
Okay. Augusta Age-Friendly started in 2016. And immediately one of the areas that we were interested in and concerned about was transportation, both in terms of pedestrians, but also public transit is another need. And there's definitely a tie-in between being a pedestrian and being able to get to the public transit location in order to access it. In Maine, by the way, we're just a little bit shy of 100 communities that are age-friendly, also often referred to as lifelong communities. And the key partners in that effort have been AARP and the University of Maine Center on Aging. And if nothing else, in terms of what I say, the most important thing we find in accomplishing our work is partnerships. And so, yes, Capital has a catchy, long name if you say all those words. That group was a spin-off from the age-friendly effort for folks, including myself, that were very focused on transportation needs. And that probably comes from my 36-year career in transportation. And so Capital then it is an advocacy group, grassroots here in the community. But what we focused on was the creation, and last year we were successful in creating by ordinance the Bicyclist and Pedestrian Safety Committee. And that committee has just been named, the members of that, and it will be led by a city councilor, currently Linda Conti. And so it will advise the city council on initiatives and improvements that need to occur for those, safety needs. And it's also not only advising the council, but it's good that it's being led by a councilor. So it's should be a great advocacy tool to improve things here in Augusta.
And is that a municipal committee then?
It is. It's
okay.
By ordinance. Yep. The members are named by appointed by the mayor. Great. And yeah, I will be on it representing Age Friendly. And we also have a member representing Capital, Kirsten Bauer. So to tie in kind of the idea of inclusivity and accessibility, one of the things last summer, I participated in AARP Maine Walk America Walking College. And so we did a walk audit of the downtown of Augusta. And that's a great tool to identify where things are working and then also where things could be improved. And having participants with disabilities or utilizing mobility devices, what I did was I brought one of my grandchildren's baby carriage and utilized that, because lo and behold, that's where you find out, as was mentioned by David, about curbs that aren't quite so friendly and things of that nature. So our key thing, you know, with all of these efforts, both age-friendly and the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Committee, is to educate, to work on implementation plans, and to promote the idea of bicycle and walk audits. A lot of this is building on a 2019 mitigation plan that Augusta Pedestrian Safety Mitigation Plan. That was, again, a partnership effort of the City of Augusta, Maine DOT, the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. And so we have all of these tools, and now we want to obviously put those tools to good use. And another key partner with the Augusta Downtown in particular is the Augusta Downtown Alliance. We work with them. And then just to put in a plug for, I'm a board member of the Kennebec River Rail Trail, and in Augusta, that indeed in the downtown is where one accesses that trail that goes from Augusta to Gardner through Hollowell and Farmingdale. And so all of those kind of tie in together in terms of accessibility and allowing folks of you know, all abilities and all ages to get around the downtown. And the same tools obviously are applicable throughout the city, throughout a community. And then just, I guess my final plug of what Age Friendly specifically is up to in partnership with the Parks and Recreation folks is we are going to have yet again, after, I think this is our 5th year or more, sand buckets that will be available for 60 plus residents of Augusta or disabled residents of Augusta. And those sand buckets will be delivered to their homes. And obviously that allows a safe ability to access, hopefully, cleared sidewalks and so on for the winter months.
That's great. Wow. Dwayne, thank you. And I like how you really housed, you know, everything you're sharing in that partnership vein, because that's obviously really critical in this work. And that's come up with Teresa and Dave and Rachel, as well as what you shared out. And I think it's awesome. Congrats on getting together that municipal committee and just really, you know, at that level, really infusing this work into everything that's happening in Augusta, and that it's so critical. I want to open it up for questions. So I haven't seen any in the chat, but if you do have a question, feel free to take yourself off mute and jump in. And we have time for questions for Teresa, Dave, Rachel, and Dwayne. Dave, please.
Yeah, I have a question for Dwayne. And thanks so much for touching on transportation. I know we talked a lot about what happens when somebody's kind of arriving at their destination, but we didn't talk about like how they get there. And so when we're thinking about an age-friendly community and those folks that have mobility, challenges, what are the solutions that you're seeing work in Augusta? Are you guys relying on volunteer ride, ride share? Do you have shuttles? Kind of what does the transportation landscape look like for you right now?
Well, until recently, Augusta was fortunate. It has a public transit service, both on demand and not. It's run into here recently resource problems, and so the schedule has been reduced dramatically. And actually, it's not only just money resources, but it's having the difficulty of available qualified drivers for those public transit vehicles. And, a common dilemma across our whole economy of having people available to work and to provide that service. But one of the things that we are looking at is in Augusta and in partnership with Chelsea and Hollowell, which those other communities also are age friendly, is to have a volunteer driver program. We're very much interested in pursuing that, and so that's really one of the items that's right on top of our list of needs that we want to try to address. And we feel the best way perhaps to do that is by the three communities working together, as opposed to trying to pursue that independently of each other.
Yeah, I know we have to probably move on, but yeah, we've seen it, right? We've seen that work in other age-friendly communities like Kennebunk, where they have a volunteer ride transportation program. Yeah, so great to hear.
Great question, Dave. What other questions are there? And please, speakers amongst yourselves as well. One question for Rachel that I have is just around any challenges that you all have seen come up when it comes to trying to apply this accessibility checklist to events, and anything you can kind of forewarn or give folks a tip on, kind of, again, backing it out and planning in advance to avoid any of those challenges.
Oh goodness. I mean, there's always something that happens at the last minute that you don't realize, right? So as much as you can try to prepare and prepare and prepare, there's always going to be something that goes awry that you just don't realize. Just keeping it in mind from the start as much as possible. But I'm struggling to even think of examples of the bizarre things that happen at the last second.
Hey, that's okay. I think that's why, the checklist can be really helpful.
Exactly. It just helps bring your brain into focus and bring all of the accessibility points to mind, and making sure that you're thinking of. It looks like Karen Knox has a question, so I'll defer.
Yeah, great. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is all really great information and very timely. And I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on some of the concerns that Dwayne brought up. And some people so this is just a little bit of information maybe about some upcoming stuff. So that there was a transportation forum, a regional transportation forum meeting in May that brought people together to try and brainstorm how folks could work together to help bring accessibility into the transportation system, create transportation systems to meet individual needs, and how DOT could support with infrastructure and how to get grants and things like that. At the end of that meeting, they said, well, who would like to meet again? Everyone raised their hand. Who would like to plan another meeting? Myself and two other people raised hands. So there's been a small committee working on having follow-up meetings to that. We're hoping to have it a small 2 meetings one is based on individual needs. Dwayne Scott, a lot of you people will be hearing about these meetings that will be convened hopefully in the beginning of January, and then another one that would loop in DOT that would be focused more on infrastructure and grant cycles available for projects with people identifying projects on a regional basis and an individual basis to try and increase all of that. And then another forum wrapping everything up in May. So just keep your ear to the ground about that. And all of this information that I'm getting here is very helpful. And I just wanted to put that out there.
Great, Karen. And Karen's in Hollowell. So she's, talking about that Augusta Hollowell greater region.
And
Yeah.
Karen, can you share your email in the chat? So that way folks, we can get in touch.
I will. Yeah. And yeah, anyone who wants to help with where I keep having to work with a group to focus them on, we are not solving these problems. We are just bringing meeting together.
Convening. Yes.
Convening a meeting.
Yeah, Karen, you bring up an interesting point, right? Which is when we think about transportation and mobility, everybody's it's hard to get people to take action because it seems like somebody else will solve the problem. And that's something that we found time and time again, is specifically around transportation. Everybody thinks that somebody else should pay for it. Everybody thinks that somebody else should be solving for it. And so that idea of partnership and collaboration is so important. And also just like the education of we collectively as a community have to solve for this because this isn't somebody else's problem. This is ours to work on.
Right. And yes, how do you get access to those funds? What needs to be in place? What's the DOT looking for? What's the grant cycle? All those things and all that information is great to have, but we need to have shovel-ready projects and think about it regionally rather than just in towns. So I'm putting that in there.
Thanks, Karen. And I'll share that in the follow-up resources as well. Anyone else have any final question for any of our speakers here? And Dave, I don't know if you had mentioned you might want to dive into just a couple more points on how you all approach events. If you want to share that for some of our last minute or two.
Totally. No, I think again, it's probably a lot of what Rachel was referencing, but we, in particular, so we host monthly meetings where our community comes together, and we have really just strict criteria on what makes a space welcoming. And again, it is very challenging. The office that I'm in right now, Rockland Main Street's office, we are up some very steep stairs in an old building. So for that reason, we don't host those meetings. We always will go to an accessible space. So we think about that a lot. And when we're putting out a call to host, we again, similar to Rachel, we have our checklist, and we've done some work to identify what does a welcoming space entail. So it's everything from that ADA compliance and accessibility down to some of the other things that Rachel was talking about how do you be welcoming and inclusive for all? How do we make sure that it's a space where we those things are invisible to some of the members of our board and committees. We're able to break down some of those barriers. So we also have evolved a checklist, but for us in a small downtown where we're 6 blocks of Main Street, that's our biggest challenge. Is we rotate all these different meetings, and we're very, very rigid, and we're not going to host a community meeting, talk about community things if it's not accessible. And so that has been a huge challenge for us, but something that we're really committed to.
Thanks, Dave. That's great. And thank you all so much. Teresa, Dave, Rachel, and Dwayne, I really appreciate you sharing your nuggets of wisdom in this very short, condensed opportunity and venue. I think one thing that's really just jumped out to me is the term that you referenced, Teresa, at the beginning of universal access. And I think that's come up, right? Whether we're talking about pedestrians, we're talking about bikers, we're talking about someone with strollers, we're talking about different abled bodies, folks that just navigate the space differently. There's so many different differences in terms of accessibility and that physical access to a space or to an event, to a meeting. And it's something that certainly Main Downtown Center is no expert on. So we appreciate you all coming in and sharing some of your lived experience and expertise. And again, this is really just the tip of the iceberg of a, much deeper and more robust topic for learning about, which we want to continue. So thank you all so much for sharing your time with us. And I will send out contact information with this for the speakers, slides, if you're okay with that, Teresa, if you'll
Yeah.
send those to me, along with some of the links that our presenters referenced. And we've got 2 more learning opportunities coming up over the next month. End of the month, October 25th, we'll have our 4 points approach, which will be more of an in-house. Ann and I presenting on the Main Street America 4-point approach to downtown revitalization. And then November 9th, we have experiential downtowns as a webinar. So another quick 45-minute learning opportunity, talking about how to make different spaces and businesses in the downtowns experiential, which is, you know, a hot topic. So Perry is sharing links for those opportunities in the chat, and we will include those in the follow-up email as well. But thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.